proudest day and the proudest time in the seat of a rally car, because that day and that hour and those minutes, I got the bit between my teeth. You know, I really stood up and was counted and said, this is not getting away. I remember when we pulled on our helmets and Donald says to me, what are we doing? I said, we're going for gold, Barrett. That's all was said. I can still picture that run. That was just the best run ever.
Welcome along to Crunching Gears. This is a special episode to mark the untimely passing of Ken Block. We were shocked and saddened, like most motorsport fans and rally fans, to hear of Ken's untimely passing. And we thought it only fitting that we reach out and speak to the people who knew and worked with him.
Yeah, we catch up with Gerard Quinn and Colin McMaster, who, spent a lot of time with Ken when he was doing these WRC exploits and beyond. They built up a strong bond and strong friendship there. And then after that, we'll catch up with Chris Meegam, Neil McDaid, Alex Gelsomino, and Martin Brady. So without further ado, I think we'll cut across and we'll hear from Gerard and Colin.
Ken, a thrill seeker, a showman, an entrepreneur, a marketing genius, and a petrol head. I suppose, Colin, maybe starting with you, how would you describe Ken?
I think you quickly just keep adding more and more superlatives and adjectives and where to start. All of these words ring true: maverick, entrepreneur, family man, just a successful guerrilla marketeer, and an innovator and an inspiration, I'd say, would be some of the key ones that stand out. I think quite early on, I'd like to say honestly, I saw something in this guy that was not about results on rally stages. It was a much bigger picture, and our friendship developed. In fact, it developed quite slowly at the start, but at the end, we did a lot of projects together, worked very closely one-on-one in these situations, and really got to know each other quite well. And he introduced me to his family when he took them on events, so we spent some time together, dinners, and with his team, with his family. So he was just a genuine all-round brilliant bloke.
And Gerard, from your experience and friendship with Ken, how would you describe him?
Yeah, I think from going on from what Colin has said, Ken was a pretty unique guy. And when I first met him back in 2010, I guess I had some reservations because I didn't quite know how to manage the relationship from a business perspective at the start, having seen what Ken was capable of doing. But very quickly we struck up a friendship, and there was just 3 years. I was 3 years his senior, so in that respect, it was pretty easy to relate to him. But very quickly, I grew to see and recognize how talented he was. A word that you wouldn't associate with Ken, but for me, certainly, I became very much aware of it. He was a shy person. Everybody said, that Ken was a showman, but I think he was one of his most endearing characters to me was that he liked to be aloof. He liked, his own time. He liked his family time. And I respected that in him. But I think above all, Ken was a very selfless person, and a lot of what he did was done in the background. And that was something that I admired him greatly for.
I think, just jumping in here, Gerard, Ken's big rally idol was Colin McRae. And there were a lot of similarities between the pair of them. And I would also extend that shyness to Colin. And of course, you would have known and worked with Colin yourself. But he was intrinsically, on the exterior, the big showman. But, in the shell underneath, he was a shy guy at heart. And both of these guys, Ken and Colin, warmed to people they saw doing something well. It didn't matter what it was, but if they saw somebody dedicated, interested, and good at what they did, they wanted to spend time with them and learn about what drove them, what was their passion for doing that.
Yeah,
and I saw it in both of them.
I think, one thing that was important to Ken was having people around him that he could trust. And equally, then that tended to manifest itself in the group of people that you were fortunate enough to be with, because we trusted one another, because that was what Ken probably expected more than anything else, because of the position he had in the eyes of the public. And you genuinely knew that the small group of people you were with, whether it be at a family dinner or after filming an event or preparing for an event, the sense of camaraderie, you were working with people that you trusted implicitly. And I think that was something that Ken had an expectation of from his team, but I think he sort of bred it into each and every one of us as well. And when we were doing the projects, we just got on and did it, and we each knew what to do and what was expected, which was great.
And when he got Ford and Ken got together basically on the collaboration 2010. So Ken would have been in his early 40s, a mature, pretty mature, talent compared to what you'd probably normally have been used to working with Gerard on the motorsport side. And again, an experienced and accomplished businessman who was able to, put together some very complicated deals with regard to his sponsors and all of that. So was that tough to work with Ken, or maybe did it make it easier because he got it? Or
I think initially it was a difficult one, because Ken came to us in Europe. Certainly it came on my desk from the US, because when he came to Ford, people didn't quite know what to do or what to make of what his proposals were. And for me, working at Ford, a lot of my life at Ford was working in the business. Motorsport was my hobby, but I always kept it away from the business. And even when I was managing the motorsport programs, I managed it as a business, because you can't let your emotions dictate to what you're going to do in the business. And Ken very quickly, he was a person who was like-minded and had an appreciation for what he could offer to Ford and what he could do in a partnership. And I think we very quickly put together then a group of people, a marketing guy in the US, Scott Denby, and a guy from my team in Europe, Will May. And they worked very closely with Ken and his team, and we quickly got to grips with his proposals and what he was putting forward to do for Ford, particularly in 2010, as we started the journey on the relationship. And Ken was very strategic in terms of what he wanted to do, but also what he believed it would do for Ford. And our joint objectives were to create excitement around the brand, and not necessarily to talk to motorsport fans, because we worked with similar pieces of data that essentially told us that motorsport fans are a very small percentage of a very big population that's out there. And to get your brand message across, you wanted to get it to as many people as possible. So from our side, that's what we wanted to do. And he very quickly demonstrated how he could reach a huge audience in a very short space of time with a positive, exciting message. And therefore he brought that to your brand. And that's really where we started with Ken.
And just out of curiosity, was there any reservation in Ford? I suppose, he'd already had the 2 Gymkhana videos out with the Subarus, and was there any hesitation around the, don't try this at home, health and safety aspect? Or did Ford embrace this as, this was going to be guerrilla marketing for the brand?
It was certainly challenging from that perspective, because we spent a lot of time internally within Ford, from my perspective, writing all sorts of papers for our legal department and getting, from his creative content, in discouraging people from, as you say, from trying it at home, and ensuring that it aligned with the brand. I remember going to one meeting where one of our senior executives in Europe described Ken as a grumpy rally driver who just created black donuts on roads and couldn't quite get to grasp what he was doing. But when when we actually opened up the box of opportunity and demonstrated what could be done throughout the year with various events. I think, it was evident that Ken had value to offer to Ford, and equally Ford had value to offer to Ken in the relationship, which was really important for him. So in that respect, I think there was a lot of work and effort went in behind the scenes to create that solid relationship and gain the respect for Ken from a Ford perspective and vice versa.
And Colin, you're a creative person, you're looking constantly how to capture and promote and market rallying from the photography side of things and its presence in the media. What was your view on, what Ken had done with the Gymkhana videos and obviously coming into, mainstream rallying or mainstream motorsport? Like, how did you view him at that stage or those early days?
Right. Mexico 2007 was the first time I met Ken, and he turned up with Travis Pastrana and a pair of Group N Subarus. I'd heard of Travis Pastrana, never heard of Ken Block, and but soon got the idea, yeah, this guy's genuine. He really does enjoy what he's doing. And what was amazing for me was I was contacted by the Subaru team in the States. It was Vermont Sports Cars. And whenever they were driving the Subarus, was supply the photos. And to me, it was a small client. I had bigger fish to fry in that sport. And here were two guys from America in Group N cars I'd never heard of, really. And they were far more interested in the images than people like Citroen, who I was working for, or Subaru, the World Rally team at that time. So these guys got it, understood it, wanted more of it, wanted better. And that's kind of where it kind of pricked my ears up that actually they care, they know what they're talking about, and they want it to look good. And there was a guy, you haven't mentioned him, Brian Scotto. He came from a magazine background, 0 to 60 magazine. And he was one of the first Ken recruited to work with him on his image in the car world. And that's much of the creativity actually should be accredited to Brian. He ended up directing all the later Gymkhana videos. But Brian came to the rallies and he was on my back right from the start. I want this, I want that, I want it bigger, I want it better. And the kind of relationship developed through Brian on the creativity side. But Ken always wanted to know what I was doing. He wanted to see the pictures as quickly as possible. If that meant looking on the back of the camera, he'd put his input into it in a positive way. I don't think he ever said he didn't like a picture, but you could tell if he wanted something a bit better. So he inspired you to take better pictures.
And Gerard, that sort of same inspirational push, what do you call it? And obviously when Ken got involved with Ford, it wasn't just the rallying he was looking at. He was looking at the rally cross, and then obviously that branding piece in the Gymkhana, because what do you call it? 2011 was the Gymkhana 3 with the Fiesta, which had something like 7 million views in the first week on YouTube. How did you have to rein him in, or how did you keep tabs on all of the activities he wanted to do?
Yeah, I think he was very astute in that respect, that he didn't want to overwhelm Ford initially, because we had to ride a very sort of thin line in terms of getting as many people within Ford on site initially, because they'd never seen anything like this before or never experienced it. And all we had to demonstrate really was something that was done, that Ken had done with Subaru. And there is a hesitance when you see another manufacturer doing something that you don't want to be seen to be copying or plagiarizing what they have done. So he, the first, you mentioned Gymkhana 3, when that went live and people saw how quickly that the views and the clicks were coming in, it was beyond their wildest dreams, because 7 million at that time was a huge viewership. And quite quickly, when it was a case of, well, what's coming next? What have you guys got planned next? And we said, well, we have a plan for the year that we put in front of you 2 months ago. And this is just one piece of it. So it gathered momentum pretty quickly. And, you know, from a business perspective, that's where we got the enjoyment when we sat down afterwards with Ken and looked to see how much cut through we had. And the sort of analysis that was done and the attention to detail that was then driven out of that, again, was, as Colin had mentioned, Brian Scotto, and there was 2 other guys, Ron Zaris and Matt Ticillo. They came later to the team, and each of them had a piece to offer and a job of work to do. And we formed that collaboration then very strongly with the guys from Ford that I'd mentioned previously, and it took off pretty quickly. I think once the rules of engagement were set out, we were able to put together, first of all, a more strategic approach to what we were doing on an annual basis. But more importantly, then, my job was to go and get the funding and the budget to go and make it happen.
And can I just jump in there? Like, Colin, you were saying about, these 2 guys rocking up in the Group N Subarus. Even at that point, was there like a different clientele following them to events? Was it the kind of the motorbike crew and the snowboarders and all that? These people coming to rallies that had no concept of really what a rally was.
Exactly. It's exactly that, Kevin, that Ken had, through his DC shoe brand, the first things he did with a rally car was a lot of stuff in New Zealand. He took the rally car onto call it a ski piece, but it's basically a snow park mountain, where they could do it in New Zealand. They couldn't do it in the States because of the rules, regulations, health and safety, and put together a film which was basically snowboarders jumping over the rally car, doing donuts on a downhill slope and things like that. So he came with these people. They were the content producers and that he knew and had worked with. So he brought them into rallying as well. But Travis came from the bike world. Ken did some motocross as well. But yeah, Travis was a motocross star before becoming an all-action hero. So yeah, they brought these guys in and they had to learn rallying as well. And I believe Ken spent a lot more time in New Zealand Rally Championship learning that on how to drive. But I tell you what, I've found the motocross guys generally in life adapt very well to rallying because they know how to deal with grip, good lines. Yeah,
and the balance and all that. It's all
balance,
part
jump,
of it.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you probably add snowboarding as another useful skill, limited grip.
So,
yeah, he was quite well equipped.
Yeah. Connor, sorry, just for jumping in there, go ahead.
No, absolutely. Listen, tear away. And Colin, as Ken undertook more rounds of the WRC, how did your relationship develop or grow, or how often did you cross paths, or when did you begin working more closely with Ken?
Actually, quite an ironic question, because I think after 2 or 3 years we stopped working together. He got quite big, had his own team around him, content producers. I think he wanted somebody more exclusive working for him, and I was committed to other clients in WRC, my agency McLean. So we stopped working together, and it wasn't really until the World Rallycross program that reunited working together, and which Gerard can take up the story for Ford, but I think it was 2000. He came over 2015, did a couple of rounds, and then 16, 17.
Yeah, he started in the he had the Focus. He had spent some time in the Focus WRC car before moving to Fiesta, and it's quite funny because there are lots of stories that of Ken when he came into rallying, because that's how that was the sport he was most familiar with. And the first thing I had to come to terms with was this, a sports athlete, trying to sell that one. And people were saying, a sports athlete, it doesn't make sense. This guy drives a car. but Ken truly was an athlete in the sense that, you know, he believed in his physical fitness, you know, right the way through. I saw him training for WRC, for WRX, whether it be in his motorhome, his training regimes throughout the year. And he had professional trainers come in and help him with that. And, you know, trying to convince people that this guy is influencing followers in so many different aspects, either it be in fitness, whether it be on snowboarding, whether it be in extreme sports and rallying, and trying to get people away from the fact that it's just not about the car, it's about your brand. So we had some interesting times in WRC, and Ken on occasion was known to go off and do his own thing. So we had a long-term relationship with Castrol, and Ken rocked up one season with his car emblazoned with Mobil sponsorship, and that was a tricky situation when Castrol come and they start checking out to make sure that he doesn't have their product in Mobil canisters and so on. So we had some interesting time and some interesting curveballs that Ken would put your way before an event.
Yeah. I think that whole Hoonigan brand was brilliant, just to create another string to the bow, and then that became mainstream, major in another separate company eventually. But it, you know, that was inspired to come up with that.
Yeah, like that become a household name. Like Hoonigan, like it's 10 years ago or whatever. You mentioned to anybody Hoonigan, they wanted a clue what you talk about, and now all of a sudden everybody knows, it's aware of it. It's the brand as such.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Gerard, you know, with the involvement of Ford Performance and M Sport, what sort of input did Ken have, and, you know, high engrossed did he get with you know, working with those two areas?
Yeah, Ken was very independent with his, particularly on the rallying side, with his WRC program. And Derek Dauncey, who had come from a rallying background and had worked with Mitsubishi and various other teams, Derek again was somebody that Ken trusted implicitly, and he worked quietly in the background to manage and run the rally program. He was his team principal, if you like. And Derek and Ken would have a lot of input with M Sport in particular, not so much with Ford Performance, because Ken liked the more hands-on approach, and he believed in working directly with people like M Sport so that he could essentially get what he needed to be able to perform at the top level, whether it be in WRX, WRC, X Games, in the Gymkhana films. So his relationship with M Sport was unique in the sense that they gave him exactly what he was looking for.
Like,
he was able to.
Sorry, Gerard. I'm just thinking, you know, like at the time he built the Focus for the WRX, like you'd almost think the most logical thing would have been to stick with the Fiesta, because, you know, that was a proven platform or whatever. But to go out on a limb and do that was that was fantastic, really, to have the balls to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was all of Ken's decision. I think it may have been something that was imposed upon him, because Ken never actually felt 100% comfortable in the Focus RS.
Okay.
You're so diplomatic, Gerard. He absolutely hated that car. I remember Malcolm Wilson said to me, "It's the best car we've ever built," and I think Ken told me it was the worst car he ever drove.
Yeah, well, I think that answers the Ford Performance question that you asked initially.
Yeah, you know, I thought you retired, but clearly not 100%.
But yeah, so the Fiesta was always when we went from Focus in WRC to Fiesta, Ken loved the car, and he was able to do with that car a number of different disciplines. So he could do rally, he could do WRX, and he could do Gymkhana. So it suited him, and he felt, you know, he was getting appropriate seat time, and he knew the car, and he could do everything he needed to do. WRX was a slightly different scenario where a car was imposed upon him to drive. He didn't have as much input into the design and development of the car that he would have wanted. Plus the fact he was sharing the car with Andreas Baccaru. So he had a great relationship with Andreas, and he took Andreas under his wing. but the car essentially was a difficult car to develop for two different individuals and two different individual styles of driving. So the focus was a bit of an awkward one for many of us, myself included, and we just had to get on and soak it up and try and do the best we could with it. But it may have been the best car that was ever built, but certainly it didn't give us what we wanted in terms of the fanfare and spectacle that we'd previously got from Fiesta.
I think there was a lot more to that rallycross program, that Ken took his entire family from the States over to Europe for the first year, I think, Gerard. Maybe this.
Yeah, they
came with a nanny and a school tutor.
Yeah, they came to Ibiza and they would set up home in Ibiza, and then Ken would do his European rounds. And that was very much came into play when we were planning Ken's year, when we sat down in Park City. Sometimes we would, some of us would get out there and sit down and work it through with Ken. But it was essentially based around what made sense for Ken, from a logistical perspective, but also from a family perspective, because it was essential for him to have his family close by.
Yeah, I think it was his big commitment to a world championship, keen to win it, bring the family, show them Europe. And, you know, what a dad would do that. I'd love it if I'd have done something like that with my dad, if he was a world superstar motorsports hero.
Cool. That is memories that, you know, them children's going to have forever, isn't it? Really, you know?
Well, I think spending a year with Andreas Backerud might scar them for life. Actually, they are incredibly close.
But I think interestingly, Ken's kids were able to relate to Andreas much easier than I think they could to Ken at times.
And Gerard, how did it sit with Ford? You know, obviously in the Fiesta and the Focus at the time, they were relevant cars. But then when Ken wanted to do other stuff in the Mustang or in the Cosworth Escort, which weren't obviously current models, how did that sit from a branding perspective?
I think, you know, that was one of the trickiest things that we had to, myself in particular, if internally trying to sell that when you've already told people that you're putting him in a relevant car like Fiesta, and then you come along and say you're going to put him in a 1965 Mustang, and they kind of think, hang on a minute, but you sold us you got last year's budget on the basis you told us it was relevant Fiesta. But I think people at that stage had got to know that it was the brand that we were creating fanfare and spectacle around. So it didn't necessarily hurt the brand by using something from the past. Now, the technology and the forward-thinking company and all of that was, you know, you just have to go with your instinct sometimes and trust people. And certainly from a European perspective, I was fortunate enough to have a number of bosses that believed in what we were doing once they felt happy that we had a strategy in place, we had a budget to meet that strategy, and we would deliver the goods. And essentially they knew over time, because they got the opportunity to meet Ken as well. You know, we hosted events where I would bring Ken along. So Champions League final, the Olympic Games in London in 2012. So it was all about giving them the opportunity to get to meet Ken as well. And I think very quickly they saw that, you know, this guy isn't just having fun here. This guy has a business head on. And they quickly began to realize that what he is providing to Ford is exactly what he said he was going to do. So I think for the final few years of the relationship, we were just let to get on and deliver what we said we were going to deliver with Ken.
And we mentioned the Cosworth Escort, and that was part of the reimagined Escort World Tour that Ken embarked on, and part of that was Donegal International in 2019. And I suppose curious as to, you know, how did we end up that we were lucky enough to get Ken onto Irish tarmac?
Well, that was that's an interesting one. The Cosy World Tour was probably one of the hardest ones to sell. The Mustang and the Humi truck were relatively easy because they were US vehicles, and it was kind of like we were doing something globally with US manufactured vehicles. The Cosy World Tour was a very difficult one in the sense that it had I think we did 9 countries. There was Poland, Switzerland, the US, Goodwood, I think, was in there, Ireland. And of course, people are saying, Ireland, why are you going to Ireland? You know, but we said, well, don't forget, like when we go to Ireland, we have these 2 transits that we've done, and transit will get, oh yeah, okay, fine, that's good. You know, we sell a lot of transits in Ireland. So it was kind of a very, even though I still had to be careful because it was my home country, and people are saying, are you using the company's money to fulfill your aspirations and your hobbies? And but Ken had always genuinely wanted to get to Ireland, and we tried maybe West Cork. We thought about Killarney. Then he had a good connection with Chris Meek and Enda Garvey. So the opportunity came up in the Cosy World Tour to do something in Donegal. So I spoke to M Sport at the time, and the R5, the Generation 2 R5 was coming on stream. And we said, well, you know, we could potentially take Ken to Donegal, get him to test the R5, and you know, if the Cosworth happens to be somewhere close by, we'll drop that off and maybe enter the Donegal Rally. So I had spoken to Damien Crawford sometime prior to that to see if there would be interest in Donegal to do it. And I guess from there we set up the test for the R5, and we got Ken over to do the rally. And I guess I'm saddened in the sense that it was unfinished business, because that was the weekend, sadly, that Manus Kelly died on that event, and that was deeply upsetting for Ken. Not because he didn't get to finish the rally, but I think it had a profound effect on him, because he witnessed something in Ireland that he hadn't seen in many other places, which was how close the rallying community was, and how he felt part of the whole rally circus in Ireland, because it was so accessible and people were genuinely courteous and nice to him, very welcoming, and you know, it had a great positive impact on him. But then when we saw what happened on the Sunday, when things you know, ended in tragedy, it was one of those things that he said to me. He said, you know what, I want to come back here. So it was a great time, and I'm just so glad that his ambition to come and rally in Ireland was, you know, and he didn't shy away from it. If you see some of the footage of the in-car stuff, Ken took to it pretty quickly, and certainly for the type of car he brought, I'd love to have seen him in a World Rally car, but sadly that's not going to be now.
Yeah. And Colin, you were part of that Donegal circus that weekend. You seen the collective hug Donegal give Ken and Alex that weekend. It was something else, wasn't it?
It was actually, just to go back a little bit, that Cosy World Tour was the year, well, it turned out to be 2 years because of COVID, but that was the making of our friendship, really. We knew each other for all these years, and then suddenly we were working quite closely together on these rally events. And I did Switzerland before Donegal, or I can't remember, maybe the other way around. And
yeah, I think there was Switzerland was part of the program.
Yeah,
and Poland. I thought you were going to say you couldn't remember Donegal. I was trying to think what pub you were in.
No, but Donegal, I'd never been to the Donegal International Rally before, so I had to call up some local experts. And there was a guy called Kevin.
You don't point asking him.
I asked a guy called Gerard, and he absolutely useless.
He really knew West Cork that way.
Kevin came up with all these amazing places where I needed to go, and lo and behold, I kept seeing him on the rally because they were genuinely good. He wasn't one of these photographers that would lie to you, sending somewhere rubbish. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, obviously up until the ending. Ironically, I was with another photographer, and he said, "Do you mind if we take someone along with us who's a rally fan?" And he just saw this guy absolutely was amazed that we had the access we did to Ken, and you just saw genuinely from people like Kevin, from people like was in the car with me, yeah, there was a genuine love for the guy in Ireland, and you all know there's a genuine love for rallying in that country. So good to hear that Ken would have gone back there. That's I didn't know that, so I'm really pleased. But it was quite a tour because I remember Switzerland, Donegal, then we had a little break and it restarted with Barbados. That's quite a nice place to go. And then
It was Italy. I think there was an event in Italy.
San Marino, that's right.
Yeah,
Rally Legend.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it was really, really good times. And it was the Barbados trip really where we had he rented a couple of villas because you had to do some quarantine. You had these multi-bedroom villas, and he took his family. They had one villa, and then the crew were next door. The production crew, which I was involved in, and we'd go out for dinner. He'd come around for breakfast as well because he brought the pavo, the Polish chef. He brought his own chef to the island for the rally, and breakfast was around our house, and then they'd off they go recce and rally, and we catch up with them later on in the day and go out for an evening meal. So they were good times, really good times.
Pavel was originally the chef we had on the WRC and the 4 team, and he got co-opted onto he wanted to become part of the Hoonigan team because it was so much more exciting and cool. And he got to see nicer destinations, and it was good. But
he had a bigger budget on the food than
yeah, I think maybe that too. Yeah, but
Ken liked the steak, didn't he? He liked the steak, but the middle of the fillet, not the rump.
Well, he was partial to Nando's as well, as we know, because that was always we had to seek out the nearest Nando's when we went anywhere, and it was interesting when we got to Donegal. He was disappointed that the nearest Nando's was Dublin. So, but Ken was also very much into proper diet, looking after himself, and for us particularly in the service areas for various rallies, you kind of grab what you can. But trying to, when you get a rider for Ken coming to you for a weekend, and you see the request on there for gluten-free, and the first time I got that, I thought, Jesus, how are we going to cope with this? And we had a standard joke then. I sent somebody, he wanted M&Ms at one point, were on his rider. So I told somebody that Ken only wanted the blue M&Ms because they matched the color of his race suit. So this person spent a whole day ripping M&M bags to take all the blue ones out to put them in a bowl for Ken. So yeah, he had a great attention to detail, but also had a very good sense of humor and liked to have fun on a weekend. I guess probably my favorite weekend of any season with Ken would have been the weekend that we spent at Goodwood, because he just liked how quirky the whole society type event was. And I remember we were going to, on the Saturday night of Goodwood, there's always a black tie ball, and Lord Marsh you will get invited to the ball, but not only did Ken get invited to the ball, he got invited to afternoon tea in the parlor at Goodwood House, and we would take him there, chaperone him to Lord Marsh. Monty the butler was there. He would meet us, chaperone Ken in for the afternoon tea, and we're standing outside waiting for him, and it was always laughter, and it was just hilarious, and he would be there in his race suit and everybody else in hoodies and whatever, and all these people are on informal wear. And I remember picking them up to go to the first ball that they were invited to, and we were staying not far from Goodwood House. So there was Ken, Matt, and Ron. So I arrived in my my suit, my dicky bow, the whole lot. And I said, right, guys, are we ready? And they came out, and the three of them are all dressed in DC camouflage shirts, black baseball hats, and trainers. And I said, guys, you can't go like that. Oh, yeah, we can. I said, no, you can't. You have to dress like this. No, they said, you need to change into something like this. So we went to the ball. We were the only people there in non-formal attire, and people saw us turning up and they said, oh, there we can, so they're okay. So it was just one of those occasions that I thought, Jesus, I can't believe we're doing this, but it worked.
But like Colin, like he was, I go back to the word you said at the very start, maverick. He didn't conform to the norm, and the sport was the better for that.
Be honest with you, I think Ken Block is the biggest missed opportunity for WRC in my whole career. That was a promoter opportunity. They had at one point in the sport Kimi Räikkönen and Ken Block doing fairly full seasons. I can't honestly remember, but it's as good and as talented and as brilliant as the current crop of drivers are, and consistently through the last 3 decades, Ken Block is on a different level on a global scale, and he brings you attention. He brings you, as Gerard said, clicks and views, and brings you traction. You got to, and his main love in the whole of all of his motoring activities is rally.
Yeah.
So a clever promoter takes advantage of that and makes sure he's part of the scene. And I would have to say that's a missed opportunity, but look at all the opportunities he made himself. He created himself. And he absolutely, I think anyone in life, you don't know when it's over, but if you could honestly, hand on heart, and say, for what I did and what I achieved through my career, I have no regrets. Wow, I'd say what a career.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you regret?
Yeah, he lived more in those 55 years than the rest of us could live in 5 lifetimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I'm only talking here about the sporting side or the competition side, but it extends beyond just the image, the Hoonigan brand, the Gymkhana, the DC shoes prior to all of that, and so his legacy will grow.
Yeah. I think, added to that, Ken had a very simple view on life, and one of his, a quote from Ken is like, you talk about living the life he did. He lived every single day as fully as he possibly could, and he was a believer. He said, be creative, live a fun life, and don't be an asshole. And that was his simple philosophy, and that's essentially what he did.
And like, we're not even touching on the family man he was either. Like, the life experience that he had given those kids, and like Leah's the oldest, and Leah's only 17, and like she is on a trajectory that could see her go to the WRC. Like the results she has achieved already, it's fantastic. Colin Mika, the young fella, the time he was in Donegal, they landed to the test. He was over changing the wheels. Like, they just get stuck in. They just do things. They're just normal people.
Yeah, it's. I was very fortunate to have a dinner with them all. I was when we were on one of these events, and I sat next to the little lad Micah, and I was interested to know about the motocross kart, whatever track they'd built in the ranch, and I imagine what came across really strongly for me was, Micah knew all about it, didn't really, and was completely unspoilt. As I said, have you got a quad bike? No. Have you got this? No. And so I think Ken was very, very clever to not to spoil his kids, but give them every opportunity possible. And I think from what I've heard, Leah, she's been driving a Formula 4. Gerard, I know these cars.
She has been driving a Formula 4. Interestingly, that was probably one of the challenges I ever came across in 2013, to put Ken into a Formula 4 car at the test track at Dunton. It was something he wanted to do, but he didn't realize how small a Formula 4 car was versus his long legs. But we did manage to squeeze him into it.
Yeah. So apparently Leah was quick, really quick. Ironically, he couldn't fit in a Formula 1 car when they tried that once, I think. But no, it's what a nice family, what a grounded, lovely family. And I'm just, they are grieving like hell, yet coming across really positive if you see any of their social media.
They just announced today, I think it's called Institute 43, which is in memory of Ken, and it's a foundation that will help to nurture young creatives, and that was something that Ken was always. I don't think not necessarily nurturing people in motorsport, but the creative side in terms of what people felt they were good at and what they could accomplish in life. And he started off in life, doing silk screen printing on T-shirts, and that's really where DC Shoes came from in 94, 95, I think. So it's great to see that his legacy through this new institute will be something that's more towards creative, that it gives a lot more people the opportunity than just people, we'll say, from a motorsport background.
For sure,
Gerard, you mentioned the word legacy there, and I suppose, do we know yet what Ken's legacy is, or is it too early to tell, what he's done for the world of motorsport?
I think, I thought about that in the last few days, and it probably is too early right now, but certainly from the experiences I've had with Ken, his legacy to me right now is certainly he's somebody who will break the internet if he does anything, and he's the first person that I ever came across that created such a storm through the internet with the content he put out, certainly from Gymkhana 5, 6, and 7, because they were probably, to me, the most exciting Gymkhana and the most daring and the most challenging ones that we did with Ken. And the phenomenal success of not just the people who viewed them, but they were in publications around the world that you wouldn't normally see motorsport or extreme sports featuring in. And that was a really exciting time. And from a business perspective, from a marketing perspective, I think, Ken will leave a legacy. He will be known certainly for motorsport, and he will be known for being a sports athlete. But I think for many people, he will be admired, respected, and admired for what he did in terms of marketing, in terms of the digital age, because he was ahead of the curve. He knew what to do when the digital age came about and how to make it work for a brand. And to me, that is a huge legacy that he leaves today before we even contemplating what else will be part of his legacy.
And just to wrap things up then, I suppose, if there's one abiding memory that you will take with you of Ken Block, just in a couple of sentences, maybe, if you could start off with you, maybe there, Colin, that one.
Just it's a bit more than a few sentences. I'll try and keep a long story not too long. Used to, obviously, you recce stages, the drivers recce the stages to make the pace notes, but the photographers recce stages too, so we know where to go. And quite quickly got into a situation where Ken would be my go-to guy. Ken and Alex, well, if I was unsure of a location, I would talk to them. And soon, after a few years and the trust was there, Ken would ask me where I was going, and he would actually get Alex to write in the pace notes. It was media. That was the note for, and it would be the film crew as well as stills and everything. And we had this place in Switzerland, and I'd seen photos of a jump it's an asphalt rally, and he did the recce. I think he arrived a little bit late and only drove the stage once. And I said, well, what did you think of the jump? He said, well, where's that then? So he got Alex to go through the pace notes, and it was 5 right, 100 crest. I thought, well, what does that mean? He said, well, it means I've got 100 meters to decide whether or not to brake. And I said, well, I'll go. He said, well, yeah, go there, and I'll do what I think's right. And he didn't lift, took off like mad, and I got the picture. And it was a bit of pressure, but it was such a nice story when you go back to say, and he was so happy with the pictures that I got. And that kind of thing continued in Barbados. And obviously when I spoke to you about Donegal, Kevin, he knew some of the places he was going to, but got a bit wild last year in Kenya. He had a Tuttle Porsche to do the classic safari rally, which is a 10-day epic marathon. It's a bit of an endurance event. It's not supposed to be flat out. And on the first day, cameraman got a nice little picture of him flying over a crest. And he said, "Oh, have you got the same shot?" I said, "I wasn't there." He said, "Oh," so mental note, his Instagram followers need to see wild action, find a jump. So the next day, drove into the first section because I knew there were all these, not crests, but they were water tunnels under the road, culverts and things. So found the one that I thought the car would fly. It was it was completely straight afterwards, flat as a pancake, big bump in the road. And I got on to Alex and said, "This is my location. It's such kilometers, such and such. It's in the road book and everything. It's absolutely gun barrel straight, and it's as flat as a pancake, easily flat out. I'd even seen the school bus didn't lift." And then he was something like the second or third car in the road, but he had 2 punches, so he stopped before they got going again. So he's in a hurry. All the cars before him, you lifted off and changed down. And now I'm stood there, and the next one's Ken, and I can hear him for half a minute flat out, absolutely flat out. And I think, oh my God, he's not slowing down here. It's a bit late to stop him. And he absolutely nailed this crest, flew massively in a Porsche and landed quite heavily on the nose. Thank God a 911 hasn't got a front radiator, hasn't got any air cooled. It's only got a oil cooler or something. So he crumpled the front and kept going. Got to the end of the stage, and then the phone starts. It was Derek and Alex giving me a massive bollock. That wasn't flat out. Ken, I went to see him in service. I thought, well, should I really? He loved it. He absolutely loved it. It's exactly what he was there for. He wanted to put on a show. He got the pictures. Instagram followers love all that. No major damage done. Friendship intact. So, but I never thought in my entire career, and I'm coming towards the end of it, I would end up writing pace notes for Ken Block.
Maybe just as well it was at the end of your career.
Yeah. I don't think Sebastian Ogier will be making the call this weekend, right?
No danger.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult one for me because Ken, as I said earlier in our discussion, Ken lived every day to the fullest, and you know he has left me with so many good memories from the sport, from the business of motorsport. But I guess the highlight for me was being able to bring Ken to Donegal and make him, you know, happy. And it was a difficult challenge for me because it didn't quite fit with Ford's plans and their strategy, but we were able to make it work. And it was a great sense of achievement, and to be able to fulfill his dreams and mine as well, to get him to Ireland. And I think, you know, after that, I would say a close second would be the weekends we shared in Goodwood were probably the best weekends of, you know, irrespective of WRC, WRX, X Games, whatever events we'd been to. Goodwood always gave us the time because we were there essentially from Thursday until Sunday. And sometimes we shared the same house or the same accommodation. We ate together, the family were there. It was a much more relaxed atmosphere, but yet we were there to do a job of work, and Ken was great to work with, and it was a pleasure to host him and to be able to make his weekend as comfortable as possible. But we always had a common objective, which we said at the outset, was to create excitement, you know, that fanfare and spectacle around the brand. And I think it's probably one of the few programs that I've worked on that all the partners that were involved in those programs with Ken, they were all 100% satisfied with the return they were getting.
Some lovely stories there from Gerard and Colin. Now we catch up with Chris Meegam, Neil McDaid, Alex Gelsomino, and Martin Brady.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me first of all. Yeah, so obviously we go back a few years back, so Ken and I had to sort of dig in my memories a little bit. We first met in early 2005. We started working together, and our first event was an event in Tennessee called the Cherokee Trails Rally. Beautiful rally that a few people in this panel are actually being there, competer or just being part of it. So it was the approach came from Vermont Sports Car that was the team that Ken has selected to start starting competing and rallying. He had officially sold DC shoes. It was a time of his life where he wanted to try some new challenges, and the team approached me, contacted me, and said that there was this new customer that was interested in competing and starting to compete in rally, and it looked like it was a fairly long-term deal. But the problem was that for me at that point, I had already committed for a ride in the American Championship in an open class car. It was a good ride, a driver I worked with prior. So I said to them, "I'm sorry, I really thank you. I appreciate you reaching out, but I am already committed." Anyway, long story short, that particular driver had happened to, unfortunately for him, to have some legal problem and had to spend a few years behind bars. So when I got the news, I was like, oh God, I don't have the ride anymore. So I contacted Vermont Sports Car and said, okay, this is the situation. And they said, well, he's got a ride, which I believe it was a rally in Canada. If that doesn't work out, we'll let you know. Anyway, the day after that event in Canada, he told me, okay, it didn't work out with that particular co-driver, so we would like you to do a test event, which was the Cherokee Trails event in Tennessee. And so that event was 2-3 weeks later. Met Ken, I remember the night before the recce, I had a meal with him and Lucy, and then the following day did a recce, and that was our introduction. Anyway, it was a one event deal. It worked out quite well, and from there on, it became a consistent ride for me.
And maybe Neil McDaid, would you come in there and too?
I was just thinking, should I give the long version or the short version? Since it's a podcast, you can always edit it out a little bit. But I was trying to think the last day. I posted a picture, which I put down as the first time I ever met Ken, was in the Maine Winter Rally, but it actually wasn't. It was much more spectacular than that. In 2000, I had been, prior to that, I'd been covering rally in the United States for the local papers, did a little bit for Car Sport, Flat to the Mat, and had been covering exclusively the Irish guys. Not that we didn't care about anybody else, but it was really around the Irish people. So 2004, Shane Mitchell was running for the championship, and at the start of the rally, there's a shakedown stage. It's called Rattler, and fairly nondescript little shakedown stage. But there's this at the finish boards. There's this kind of a kick, and if you hit it at the right spot, got spectacular. I was up there at the end of that stage in 2004. I was actually doing sweep for the rally, and Shane came over it and basically up on the door handles. And I'd snapped a picture of it, and somebody else was there, and they took a picture of it. But in 2005, I'd been standing down Rattler at the start at the service area. I'm talking to Shane, and I asked Shane for some reason he wasn't doing the shakedown, but Ken came kind of. The one thing about Ken is he come over and he has the hands in the pockets, and he had his gear on and his white suit on, and he got talking to Shane, and he was like, "Sit, Shane." He's like, "That was, I'm sure much to the dismay of Alex." He says, "Where was that last year that you were up?" And Ken was there. Shane says up the top of the shakedown stage, and he chatting to him, and Shane kind of told him how I hit it and stuff like that there, and so I wasn't going to go up. Shane wasn't going. I wasn't going to go up. I said, I'll take a ride up anyway, and went up, and I was myself and Lars Grange, who was the photographer for Super at the time. We're standing in, and Lars had told me when I got there, he says, you need to be careful here. He says, it's kind of, some of them cut the grass. He says, and some of them are okay to come out. Ken comes over, same as Shane, way up in the air, but he was just that little bit further out in the road, and where Shane kind of got caught in the groove, and Ken got it down after that, but he got it down and was up so far that he just gave it a little turn to kind of not keep it from going over, and it ended up just shooting into the middle of the marsh. No damage, but the car beached itself. But so I talked to Ken very briefly. So Ken gets out of the car and he's walking around in the middle of the marsh. Alex is in the car, got out of the car, didn't really get out, standing on the roller cage. He's looking around, and we shouted into Ken and was like, this stage is called Rattler for a reason. There's rattlesnakes on it and you're in the middle of the swamp. And Ken walked out to the road, and he was like, wow, what was that like? And he kind of joked with me. He's like, did you picture that? And I said, Lars was there. I said, Lars got a picture. I didn't really, but I kept on chatting, and it kind of went from there. I had a picture which I showed him in the back of the camera, but never really posted. It was a little different than what Lars has, but because he was a photographer for Subaru, I didn't feel that it was his deal. So, but it progressed from there. But I'd say when I really got to know Ken was, and Alex might remember, it went on. There was a couple of different shots throughout the years. It was just, I would give them to, or Vermont Sports Car, get them off indirectly through Ken. Ken would send me a message, whatever. But in 2009, I don't know if it was Alex or it was the guys from Max Media. They had they contacted me and they says, hey, would you be interested in coming up? Ken's having a test day up in Kearney's, which I knew very well because we've been up there twice before in the Mark II Escort. And I was like, Mark II Escort? I was just, sure, we'll go up. Not to say it kind of was my last statement, my first statement. It was one of the best days in rallying ever. When I say rallying, a rally car on the stage, Ken went around that freaking stage like relentlessly, and I'm like, this little Mark II Escort is just. But it was great, and he was being Ken. He was perfecting every corner that he could find. As I said, I took it from there, and he asked me to cover some events from there on out, and I did the 2010 season with him, and as he says, this is the short and this is the long version, but it's gone from there, and it became a good friend.
And then Chris, Meegam, you want to come in there? Your thoughts on it?
Well, I was slightly younger at the time when I kind of heard of Ken coming in. I think that was the International Rally New York in 2005, and I might have been 12 or 13 at the time. So I was a little younger at the time. So I didn't really actually meet Ken in person probably until New York 08 then. I had footage of him and whatnot, but I was always traveling around my father. My father would take me to the events. He used to race himself, but we were always out spectating and whatnot, and normally not in the services as much to actually get talking to Ken or Alex in general. But then Ken had come to New York, which would have been my home event in 08 for the tarmac versions. And there wasn't as much media coverage at that event. It wasn't the national rounds. It was kind of a subsidiary round of the, USAC at the time, I think it was. And that's when I first really got to start talking to Ken and Alex, because they were looking for footage, and I met Ken that way and, provided a couple shots. I mean, granted, it was on little Sony handy cams or whatever they were at the time that, the quality's gotten a little bit better over the years. And then, another memory then further on was probably Maine. Maine would have been my second event to go to a lot. And I remember, I think it was maybe 2013 at one of the test days at Team O'Neill's. I was just walking around, there was a couple cars testing at the time, and I think Ken had his motorhome up there on the property. All of a sudden the door pops open. Chris, how's everything? And I hadn't seen Ken in a couple of years probably at that point. And I was in not disbelief, but I just couldn't realize that he remembered my name still after, probably all the people that he had met over the years at that point. But, and then, been shooting, gotten shots of him, a video the last couple of years has been something else. And even last season with the Hyundai was just unreal. So that's my little story there. I tried to keep it a bit shorter than the other.
and Mr. Brady, your familiar voice on the podcast, what's your first memories of meeting Ken Block?
I had to think about this. I know the first event that I did in the US that Ken and Alex would have been doing, I think was '06 SCPR. But my first memory of him was the following year, and that was Dave Mira, another person who's sadly no longer with us in the sport. Dave Mira was there, and there was quite a bit of excitement about it. We were on recce for Snowdrift, and there was people sort of gathering. Ken and Alex and Dave, and I can't remember who was sitting with Dave at the time, were there, and people were going up looking for Dave's autograph and so on. And he was, to me, I didn't realize the significance of Dave outside of rallying, but I remember people clamoring for his autograph and so on. And what I remember was having a conversation with Ken and Alex about the recce car. I don't know if Alex remembers what that was at the time. It was some sort of a real cool Pontiac, it's like a 2-wheel drive turbo thing or something. Something that on the face of it was probably not the best thing for recce and Snowdrift, but that was my abiding memory. And what I had seen of Ken first was the New Zealand video, the snow video. That was just so cool. The one over the jumps, I think it was Snow Lab 2.0 or whatever. That was my first introduction to Ken Block, and I thought it was just something different, something cool. And the music track that it used with it, it brought so many new things together that was from outside of the sport of rallying. And it wasn't ostensibly a rallying video, but I thought it was cool because there was a rally car in it. And it drew me to the video because there was a rally car in it. So obviously the inverse of that was it drew so many other people outside of the sport of rallying to something that had a rally car in it. And that was the thing that Ken did so much over the years. And I think people are only realizing that now in retrospect, in what's a sad time and a sad story, and people now reflect and realize just how much he did that, and that they really appreciate now just how groundbreaking that was, what it did for the sport, and the level that it reached, and the professionalism that it had, and that it brought. There's countless stories in the last number of days on social media about, and the common thread through it for so many people is, I never would have gone to a rally, or I never knew about rallying until Ken and Hooligan and so on. So it's bittersweet to see that now, I guess, that people understand and appreciate that. And I know it's a sad time for Alex and the guys on a personal level, because I've seen it firsthand. There's been such a close-knit team there for so many years, and Ken had that around him. And I can view it from the personal side, and the personalities involved, and the bond that those guys had on the team, and how right back from the days in the Vermont car, there's so many guys that then moved on when Ken set up the guys set up their own team. But I can see that, and I know what it's like to be lucky enough, and Alex and Ken had it to have a co-driver relationship that lasts for as long as it did. And it, they will have known each other so well in the car and got on so well together. And I've had that with a couple of drivers, but one of them, and the story crosses over here. I can remember one morning, Seamus Burke, we were all happened to be staying in the same hotel. There was Ken and Alex, and Travis was there as well. And I went down for breakfast, and Seamus bin Seamus was up an hour before any of us, and had been over the road to the shop. And he the filling station, and he came in like thunder and went up to one of the organizers of the championship and started to tell him quite forcefully, and wagging his finger, that he'd been over the road in the filling station and had spoken to the lady behind the counter and explained to her that he was in town for a rally. She knew nothing of what a rally was or what the rally was. She had no idea. But as soon as he said that Ken Block and Travis Pastrana was coming to town, straight away, instantly, it fired something in her. She knew who they were. She understood all of a sudden what it was. And we were in a small town in the middle of America that the rally had come to for years before, but the rally was not an event, but the personalities and the names made it an event. And I remember he came over, and Seamus came over and quite forcefully said it to the championship organizer: "You're not making the best of this. These guys are household names. You should have advertisement. You should have a billboard coming into the town 6 weeks ago telling them that the circus is coming to town, and these guys are the circus. and you're not making the best of it, and you're not appreciating these guys, what they're doing for you and what they're doing for the sport. And both Ken and also Travis, who was there, they were quite, they were modest about it. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is that we just didn't realize just how big an impact Ken was having on the sport as a professional and as a marketeer, and the levels that he brought it to and the things that he did. They were groundbreaking and shattering. And he was an icon and a hero to so many people, both in the competition side of the sport and just in the automotive side of the sport. And I can remember, for me, when I was younger, and my first hero in the sport was Ayrton Senna, and how much it shook me and shook other people in the sport at the time when he was lost to the sport. And I don't think it's overreaching to say that the loss of Ken Block to motorsport and the automotive industry it's on a par. And I think that's the professional ramifications, or the level of the loss that it is to the sport. And then we have the personal loss that I know the guys will be feeling in that team and his family, and it's so sad, and that will go on for so much longer. And I hope that in the midst of it all, they'll have the happy memories. And I know there was many, but the one memory that abides with me, and Ken regularly came back in the queue to talk to Seamus, and I've done rallies with Seamus since 2010. So nearly every rally, Ken will be walking back the queue and he would talk, and there was great human conversations then. But I can remember one conversation that struck me in the difference in Ken Block as the person and Ken Block as the rally driver. I was doing a rally, and I think it was probably 2013 with another driver. We were in Maine in one of the stages where there's a turnaround. So, you have to wait for all it's not something we'd be used to here in Europe, but it's a good system. It works well in America, where that everybody completes the stage, they park and they wait in like a regroup situation to go back into the stage. And Ken came back and he was talking to us. And at that time, I think he had just moved to Utah, and the conversation revolved around moving the family out to Utah and the impact of actually moving the dogs to Utah, and how that it was just a human conversation and a nice chat to have about a family moving and schools moving and all that. And he was very much Ken the person talking about his family and quite proud about it. And then somebody came up to interview him, and quite literally, just like you'd see in any other form of motorsport, F1 or whatever, zipped up his suit, closed his collar, excused himself, turned and clicked into professional mode, where he was, I wouldn't go as far as to say he was playing a character, but he turned on and he gave the interview everything that it needed, and the levels of promotion and so on. And he hit every mark, and it's just a memory for me of the consummate professional that he was, and how he could do, the private person and then the professional person, just excellent in both spheres.
Alex, was it clear from the early days of you sitting with Ken that he had this fantastic grasp, unconventional grasp nearly, of social media and how to use it, and maybe an unconventional approach to promoting himself and the sport?
Well, it was obviously clear that there was something special, something different, that had to do with the way he wanted to sort of like bring his experience from previous experiences I had, like a business experience with DC Shoes, and the way that brand was promoted and became a household name. He wanted to do the same with the sport of rallying. So that was clear at the beginning for me. But let's remember, we're talking about 2005 when we started working together. So there wasn't really social media didn't quite exist at that point. I was thinking, like, how did they promote that sort of media? And it was like they would sell DVDs, the famous DC DVDs for skateboarding and snowboarding and things like that. And yes, videos started to appear right after, and then there was the boom of social media a few years later, and that was the way, really, because he was such an innovator. he was such a smart mind when it came to promotion and media and marketing. He embraced that tool, and he offered that tool to promote his sponsors in a very, again, innovative way. So I did see that growth, and I was privileged to experience that transition from non-social media to then social media, and taking over the world of social media, and creating such a platform that was so valuable for the sponsors, for the partners, and everything. To a way that no many drivers had been able to, or teams have been able to accomplish. I mean, nowadays we see some teams for the social media platforms, or some teams in Formula One and WRC and so on. You see that it's sort of like an evolution of what Ken started in the late 2000s. So it's great. He was aware of that, but it's great for us that we were part of his circle to see that what's happening today on social media is pretty much credit to what he started 12, 15 years ago. So yeah, I wasn't I'm not an expert on social media marketing and so on, but it's been great to be on the side of, especially even some of the meetings that happened within the team, with the media team, and understand and learn that. I feel very privileged to have been sort of like a fly on the wall and experience that. And then there was obviously the Ken rally driver, and to sort of like expand a little bit the answer to your question is like, I did see right away, like that very first rally in Tennessee. I remember the first time we were in the car together was a shakedown of the event. And I remember doing 1-2 runs of the shakedown and thinking, okay, he knows what he's doing with basic things like weight transfer, rotating the car and everything. There was definitely something that I had not seen before with other drivers. And you can tell it was a combination of what he learned at rally schools like Tim O'Neill, or private tuitions, with David Higgins and so on. And also his previous experience in sports like motocross, or even skateboarding and snowboarding and everything. He knew dynamics. He knew what weight transfers and things like that were. So that applied very well right away into his rallying. And it was something that for me was great to see, because I knew from the beginning, okay, there is a massive potential here. Obviously, Ken was a wealthy individual at the beginning. There were no sponsors. Our first events were pretty much white suits, and and there were no corporate names. Yeah, the car was carrying DC Shoes sponsorship, but I knew that there was a potential there to progress, especially when I realized how passionate and how much he loved the sport of rallying. So it was something that it was great to see. And in the back of my mind, I knew something big was about to happen as far as him and what he will give to the automotive and motorsport industry in a few years to come. But I couldn't quite understand what it would be. I knew it was coming, but I didn't know what it was going to be. And then it was obviously great to experience it year after year, and then the Subaru years, the Ford years, and then Gymkhana progressing into the marketing, media, and tool that it had been for many years.
Actually, I can add just a little bit on the back of what Alex says. There is that from a slightly different perspective. I think that one of the biggest things that we noticed back in the day was we had ESPN covering rally, and they did a pretty good job of it. I think they might have one time they had one camera, they had two cameras or whatever. It wasn't a lot. I think when Travis came on board, they popped them up a little bit more. But when Ken arrived, it started off, I wouldn't say slow, but it started off, and Rally America, Rally in the US was just not ready for Ken Block. They talk about people stepping into the limelight. Well, not only did Ken step into the limelight, he brought his own lights with him. I mean, this was, and you got to realize also, I think I could be wrong on this. Somebody can fact. YouTube only got going in 2004, I believe, or 2005. So Ken knew more about YouTube than we knew about it, but he was moving so fast. And, this is where I'm probably going to get somebody going to stick a dagger in me. But the resistance that we got in the media office, Ken had a crew, and I kind of, as we went through those years, we had a crew from Mad Media, and the grief that we got, just getting credentials, we had too big of a crew. And it was a tough thing for the rally organizers to kind of corral. They tried to corral it, but then they realized, wait a minute, this is good for rally. But there was so much coverage that Ken could generate that other competitors down the field were like, we're getting no coverage, but they didn't realize that Ken was generating the coverage. So much so at one point, I believe it was at Olympus or somewhere, that there was this kind of a brouhaha started up, and Ken offered, because I think at the time there was Mad Media. I wasn't officially on the crew at that time. I actually was kind of showing Mad Media around, and Ken offered to cover the event. He was like, I'll cover the event for you. He's like, I'll cover as many cars down to the field as I can. We have enough crew here, and they weren't prepared, but eventually, the rest is history. We got the X Games, and as Alex says, it was fast track from there. So,
sure. And Chris, as you talked about earlier, you're this young fella, at 13, and then all of a sudden, you were in the midst of the media. In the midst of this
social media boom. Yeah. So, I guess I'm sure since you were a child or anyone else over in Europe, they would have had a clue of what rallying was. When I was in elementary school and younger, I mentioned rallying and no one had a clue what I was talking about. They just knew it was cars and that was it. All of a sudden, YouTube rolls around, the late 2000s roll around, Travis is in the mix with rallying, Ken's now in the mix. I get to college, I mentioned Ken's name, I mentioned Travis's name. Mostly at least guy at that point knew who Ken was, who knew Travis was. They were like, wait, you've met these guys before, and what they were, I've seen his Gymkhana stuff, I've seen this, I knew the dirt biking and whatnot. And it just, you could see from when you're in the moment, you don't realize it at the time, but that transition of no one knew what you're talking about here, and then all of a sudden, now you can mention to someone, even just this week now on job sites. I'm in the construction industry. There's guys that, I've chatted about, I do this. And they're like, like Ken Block and whatnot. They're like, they know, just random people will know what rallying is now compared to what it was in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, with that boom and what Ken generated for the social media aspect of things, and with bringing the media teams on, because as Neil said, to get a media pass here for the longest time was, it was a bit difficult, depending on what you were doing. And then I think in the last couple of years now with the likes of the ARA series, they've realized what the social media aspect to this is and the growth of what, needs to be done to promote the series. And that's, whether you like it, it's directly contributed, I think, from Ken, joining the sport here.
For sure. And what the appeal he had, you're touching on, went way beyond rallying. He was household. He was, the man in the street knew who he was, and that was probably never properly harnessed. Martin, you want to take that one?
I don't know about harness, because I think Ken harnessed it with his team behind him. They did, they got every centimeter they could out of it. I would say it was harnessed by them, and that they gave it their best effort, and I can't see, there was no stone unturned there. And things like just outside of motorsport and competition, the Gymkhana videos were just so iconic and epic. I mean, everyone has their favorites. I remember watching the San Francisco one and being blown away by it, and understanding what those cars could do and the mechanics and the dynamics of it, knowing what was possible. But then seeing how much further Ken was taking it was just, was crazy. So I think, yes, the guys at Hoonigan did everything they could, and we have to be grateful for what they did. But to the point that, was it harnessed? Perhaps, as the guys are saying in the early days, no. You would have to say it wasn't. It took people time to catch up Ken and the guys were so far ahead that it, you know, took people time to realize just what this was. But to the point, my memory of that time of the, you know, being in the town in the middle of America where the rally meant nothing, but the guys meant everything. And, you know, my driver Seamus, when he came in and made that point that, yes, perhaps at that point there should have been something more to do. Okay, I know there's whatever amount of cars doing a rally and you have to give all the competitors attention, but I think in this instance, they could have been singled out and maybe used more as a vehicle to promote the sport. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say, you know, leaving the I suppose Ken was the modern day Evel Knievel as such, leaving all that out of it. Just as a rally competitor, you know, you have to take a moment to say all his results and the speed that he had, and the, you know, how, you know, Alex talks about how where he started, he always had that innate ability, and he had that you know, that skill set was there, but how he refined it and moved on. And if you just look at the amount of rallies the guys did there and where they traveled, it's not just in the US. You know, they've won Rally Legend, they've won Barbados. You know, there's great in-car there when they did Duvar and things like that. So there's iconic, you know, the Safari as well and the Total Car. If you just look at the actual reach the guys had and the events they did and the results that they put up in those ones. And when the guys came to Donegal, I would say that I was quite biased in that, because I wanted to see them come and do well, because, you know, I have a foot in the American camp so much and for so long. I wanted to see them do well and acquit themselves do well. And I know I think it was the third stage you stopped on, Alex, but on the second stage, they had a stormer of a time in the National Rally, beating guys, you know, first time in Donegal, first time on Irish tarmac, you know, to beat some of the lads that would know every bump and bend of where they were going, because rallying in Ireland is, I don't want to get off the point here, but rallying in Ireland has gone like that, where there's, I won't say local knowledge, but there's repetition of stages. You know, when you go to Donegal on the Friday, you're doing these stages and everyone's very familiar. So to come into that and put on a result like that shows the measure of the pace, and the ability was there. And you have to remember, you know, Ken twice got to the very thin end of, you know, the American Championship race, and David Higgins, Brandon Semenuk, and that's no mean feat. So as well as being, you know, the expert marketeer and team owner and visionary that he was, there was nothing wrong with Ken Block, the rally driver, either.
Definitely, you know, and you know, even looking at, you know, beyond that, even the WRC, Alex, you spent 2 years in the WRC, and every event you went to, it was almost going to for the first time, and to acquit yourself so well, it was, looking back now, it was unheard of somebody to come in at that level and be able to score, you know, top 10 results. It probably didn't get the credit it deserved at the time.
Yeah, I agree with you. You're absolutely right. And look, Ken was the first one to, because he always pushed for the next level. He was never happy, you know, because he wanted to always over deliver for the sponsors and the fans. You know, that was his way of being in our sport. I always disagree with Ken as far as the results in WRC, because he always wanted to do better than what he had done. But in my opinion, considering, you know, the later age he came into a sport, and the fact that unfortunately when he started in the American Championship, you know, the reconnaissances weren't open. You know, we didn't have proper 2-pass recce. You know, we would. And that has reflected also in Travis's career. You know, when you see those two drivers, even more recently, going to events to do recce and asking Rhiannon and myself, hey, I do want to start the recce with a gem, but we organizer provided notes. It makes you realize that the early stage of the rallying wasn't ideal when it comes to understanding and making notes and recce procedures and such. So that reflected a little bit when Ken and I went to do WRC events and slow down the progression. I mean, it's the World Rally Championship, the best drivers in the world and the most difficult events in the world. But as soon as we sort of like figure out, that started to also we started to get some consistency even in WRC finishes, and we were never going to match, the guys that were competing full time and were testing week in and week out. At the end of the day, we were a privateer team. But in my opinion, his effort in WRC events was also quite strong. Many top 5 stage times in selected events, or some top 10 finishes, or going to events like France tarmac or New Zealand, and being in some close battles with some drivers that had a lot more experience than Ken, and being able to win in those battles. So it was there was some positive. There was some really strong results in WRC. Obviously, many would disagree with that, but we know the real stories, and part of it is what I just explained before with the previous experience going into WRC, but also his age. I remember doing WRC Spain. I believe it was the last day, one of the last times we did WRC Spain. I forget the year, but we finished the last stage with a puncture. Anyway, it's a fairly long stage, and Thierry Neuville is only starting, 2 minutes behind us. I think it was something in the 50-kilometer stage, something like that. And Ken was concerned because, okay, 2 minutes, 50 Ks, it could catch us. It's someone that is an extremely talented driver, is half my age. Anyway, we finished the stage, and we never saw Thierry, not even at the stop control. So, but it just gives you an idea when himself was concerned about things like that. Drivers half his age, it makes you realize that at the end of the day, in WRC, he did a good job. He might not agree with that, and Martin mentioned before, you go to specialized events like Barbados, of New Zealand and Rally Legend and so on, and you are able to win, or Canada, for example, you're able to win those events outright, competing and beating some of the local drivers, which in rallying, we know that these are the strongest, the local drivers that no one knows about. These are the strongest drivers, the hardest to beat. Donegal was such a specialized event that we couldn't beat the local drivers. But guess what? We left Donegal, and our experience on tarmac had improved so much. And then we went straight to Rally Legend and got into a battle with some local drivers, and everybody wanted to beat Ken. Everybody, the local drivers wanted to beat Ken, and we go to Rally Legend and we win Rally Legend, thanks to the experience and thanks to being a Donegal and getting our ass kicked by the local drivers. There was always a method there. Trust me, especially with the guidance of Derek Donsey over the last decade or so. So it just didn't flow as much as it would have with a younger driver, just because he got into the sport such a later age. But in my opinion, he did a fantastic job. And yes, we did lose 2 championships, and but at the same time, from Ken's words on the video that we had from the championship last year, sometimes you learn more, sometimes you gain more by losing than winning. Let's be honest, I have never learned anything from winning rallies. Never did. I always learn and improve as a human being and as a competitor from losing, from making mistakes.
Yeah, and we keep hearing about Ken. He surrounds himself with the best people. He demands the best. Neil, from your point of view, you were brought into that circle. Did you have to lift your game and keep pushing on the whole time?
I had a very interesting kind of way into Ken, and I told him right up from the start that when Alex, or again whoever called me up to Kearney's that time for the Fiesta or for the Escort drive, and at the end of the day, Ken says, "Hey," or I think Alex first told me during the middle of the day, there's this thing coming up with Ford, and Ken talked to me at the end of the day, and he said, "Are you interested in doing this?" And I said that, I have a full. Well, I'm working for myself. I do work for myself. I says I'm fairly committed work-wise. I spend most of my time in Asia, actually, and I says I would. I looked at the calendar and I says, give it a shot, but one of the things is a big struggle was to get to the test days, which are the best days, but it really is a big commitment. It's almost like, you're talking about 5 or 6 days in total. So that day at Kearney's, I got to know Ken pretty well, because he said to me, I got the end of the day, I did 300 pictures or something. And I was like, so what do I do with these? And he was like, pick 4 of them. And I was like, which 4? He's like, pick 4. He says, you're here. He says, we asked you up here today because, he says, I like what you do. They're rally pictures. They're not anything else. They're good rally pictures. If you pick them, put them out there. But he definitely changed my perspective on media in rally and how to present yourself and how to put your best foot forward, and don't put 3 feet. Don't post everything. Just post 1 or 2 here or there, and make enough of it. And he gave me the opportunity, many opportunities. I couldn't take up. And he asked me to go to Mexico with him that year, and I couldn't do it. And he asked me multiple times to go to Gincana, not because he couldn't find other photographers. There's plenty of photographers out there, and some great photographers covered those events, but it was more of just having as many good people, or people that, I was honored to feel that Ken thought it was good enough to be in that realm of people. So yeah, he did elevate my game in that. I'm still, very much part-time photographer. I love rally. It's my passion beyond any other passion. And but I think knowing Ken and being around Ken, and and that was limited to rallies. It elevates your game. You will elevate your game. That's just, you see what he does, you see who he is, you see how he presents himself. I think Martin stepped on it perfectly well. If you're having a one-on-one conversation with Ken Block, it's a great conversation. He's not generally who everybody else sees. He's this down-to-earth guy who will talk to you about normal things, and when the time comes up to step up, to get up to the mic and be in front of a camera, he zips across and he's all of a sudden this Ken Block that everybody knows up here. So, but yes, he elevated my game. I wouldn't say that he ever pushed me, but and he rarely critiqued any of the pictures, because I tried to give him the best ones I had. So, but yes, he brought us forward, no question about that.
And Chris, you talked about starting off with a wee sunny handycam, and your tools progressed as the years went on. What's your thoughts on where Ken helped you to develop as well?
I also have to give a shout out to Alex, because Alex has put me in contact with the Hooning guys, prior to the last couple of seasons, because just seeing how media was going and how Ken's crew was going, and I'm very familiar with all those guys that work for Ken, because we see them. Me and Neil would see them out on the stages all the time, and we chatting there. But you have to step your game up when those guys are at an event, because you're just, as a creative point of view, you're trying to make sure you're putting your best foot forward, and you see what these guys are doing. And I used to always just go to an event. I would just get there the night before, go out to the stages on the Friday, and figure it out, kind of thing. The last 2-3 seasons now, I'm doing recce just the same as the drivers are doing as well. I've run into Alex and Ken, or Travis and Rhiannon, out on the stages, or Martin as well there, driving around the place, and all of a sudden there'll be a New York plate driving around, in the middle of Ohio or Maine or wherever. And, I'm trying to get my best spots and figure out things, from the video end of things, to try and make sure, because that's what the thing is. Even me and Neil have had this conversation, a little bit there, where reels have just taken over Instagram and TikTok or whatever. It was always photos, and now video has stepped up, drastically the last couple of years. And that's, especially in the rally scene out here, it's mainly Ken's guys that, and the Hoonigan team, and Matt Johnston was Ken's main guy, for shooting out here. And you have to compare yourself to the best to try and keep up. And that's what I've been trying to do the last couple of years. And it was a privilege to be out there, I think at least half the events the last couple of seasons, to, watch these guys, and the pace. Alex can attest to the pace that has been brought to the championship the last, couple seasons. It's been unreal to be on the side of the road to watch and, capture. It's drastically changed from 2005 to now. It's like I've never been to a WRC event, but seeing those guys on the side of the road in the open class cars has just been unreal to try and capture.
Excellent. Sorry, go ahead, Connor.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned there Ken surrounded himself, with talented people, but certainly from his social media, he seemed to be, a very strong family man, and again promoting Leah and Lucy in the last year or two. And that, I don't know, Martin, did you get to witness that family side of him out on the events?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, of course you would. And then in the years when I suppose it was a benchmark to see how quickly Leah turned from, a little girl that was at the rallies that you would see in the background to the next thing she was driving. She sort of belied her young years. You forget how young she is. But yes, I've seen that side of it too. Again, in years being with Seamus, Lucy would come up and talk to us and stuff like that. It was always, there was a little bit of rally talk, but it would always be about the family and what was going on and different things, and what travel had gone on since the last rally or what was happening, things like that. So yeah, it was a testament that the family life was so strong and so important there, and that rallying was so much through the whole thing for them. And there was such a family activity, and again, not to be too somber, but it shows you that there's the personal loss there very much for the family and for the team, which is an extension of that family. So many guys that are in the Hoonigan team that have been there as long as I've been in the US going rallying, it's the same faces that you see. So for those guys, it's just it's a huge loss for them. I'm very conscious of the thought of that's the sport has lost, the personal side of it as well. But we just won't forget him. You couldn't forget him. I come back to my point that I think for some people, it's a loss to the sport, and we'll be remembering him fondly for a long time. He won't be forgotten, that's for sure.
And Alex, obviously, you spent a considerable amount of time with Ken, but in the last year or two, what what work was he doing with Leah? Where did he kind of see or envisage Leah going? If it seemed that she was starting to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah, for sure. There is we can clearly see there is a family legacy there, and a name legacy that was being built. And like Martin said a moment ago, we did all the work possible to make sure that Leah's progression from karting into the rally stages was as smooth as possible. And Ken had a clear idea, envisioned in his mind what the next step would be, so it is also a shame we didn't get to see that. It's he had a clear plan in his mind for his kids to continue in rallying. He loved rallying, and he realized that our sport is such a unique sport, that it's a sport that creates the true grit. It creates real men and women. Him and I talked about that, and I said, Ken, if you want your kids to have strong personalities, to become real men and women, you need to introduce them to a rally from an early age. But he knew that there was no need for a reminder, so that the plan was all in place, and hopefully some of the plan can still happen. There is a lot of people that are involved in the sport, the race team, and Rhiannon and I, that are very close to the family and the kids. And our goal, our mission at this point is to carry on with the legacy, because that's what Ken would have wanted, and we'll see. We'll sit down in the next few weeks, see where we are, with Derek Dauncey and with the rest of the team and the family, and see where the kids want to go. But they clearly understood the importance of our sport in Ken's mind, and they were already, like you said, indoctrinated. They were already participating. So don't be surprised if you see in the near future or medium future Leah, Lucy, and then the other kids being part of our sport.
The one thing
continuing our sport. Yeah.
The one thing that sticks out in my mind is the time in Donegal. Lucy and the kids rocked up, and is it Mika, the young fella, was over changing the wheels. Like there were no prima donnas. They had to get on, and get stuck in. Like yes, he was giving them the best opportunity, but they had to work for it too. Martin, you were there that day, and you got a chance to sit with Ken that day. That must have been a privilege for you. But to see the way that the kids just got stuck in there, it was something else, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a lovely day and a nice memory. As I say, I was there was a pride in me to see the guys, to see the team come to Ireland, and I wanted them to do well. So yeah, great test, really well organized, as you would expect. Everything was just so, but there was the family side of it. The kids arrived, and this is where I say that it seems that doesn't seem like that long ago. I know COVID and everything has perhaps elongated the timeline. That was 20. What year were you in?
19. Yeah.
19. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
And Leah seemed so young then, and then all of a sudden she's jumped on to being in a car. But yes, as you say, the kids and the family were very much involved with everything that day. And what I saw was that day, in the car with Ken, the professional side of him, that at the start of the day there was a clear goal, what work had to be done to the escort. Did some runs with them. There was an engineer, did some runs, and it was very much every run was timed. There was the serious side of the work was out of the way, and then there was some guests to be brought for spins, and that was done. And then there was a little bit of a break, and then the professionalism switched in again because it was time to move over to the R5, and that was something quite exciting that day because it was the first time that the R5 had been driven, the Mark II R5 had been driven, or Rally 2, I think it would have been called then. Outside of M Sport, it hadn't been seen anywhere. So Ken was the first person to be entrusted with that, and M Sport had given him that car. So he effectively was giving it its debut outside of the airfield in Cumbria. So that was a big deal. But he was again very much switched into that. There was that was taken seriously. It switched to. Derek and he and the guys there had a plan for how many runs they wanted to do in the car and where they wanted to get to. And of course, it wasn't the only test he was doing pre-Donegal, so they had an idea of what they were doing that day. So it showed, you could see the thing from all sides of it. You could see the family side of it, the team side of it. There was the time to be professional and very measured and focused in what you were doing. And then there was the time to have fun and bring some guests and so on. And then there was also the time he was asked. So the test was very much in conjunction with Donegal Motor Club, and there was everything was thought of. It was in a very picturesque place up there in Malin, so there was the opportunity, as Kevin, to get beautiful shots there, and the national television station RTE were there, and they wanted to do an interview with Ken, and the Gardaí were there, and there was the local the inspector of the Guard of the Traffic Unit, and he, through with the motor club, made a mention to Ken about, maybe is there something he could do to represent road safety, or that because he was an influencer in every sense of the word, could he mention something about, road safety and the need for spectators and followers of the rally to be mindful of their behaviour on the road of the weekend. And that interview is on YouTube there, and he just, with the few words that they gave him, that they wanted him to hit this point, he went on and did it on the news report, and that was on the news in the evening. And it was, as I say, everything was thought of, and all the points were hit. It was just, a really good day. But even in that moment, he was able to do that interview, talk about himself, talk about the rally, but get the point across that the rally wanted him to do, to the spectators, because his words would carry more influence than anything. So yeah, but in retrospect, a nice memory at the time, and in retrospect, an even nicer memory now.
And the family man then kicked in. They finished the rally, and and most other boys would be going back looking at DVDs or whatever. They went off to the Giants Causeway as a family. That just was, he was able to switch from rally driver to family man just so easily. Yeah.
Well, at the time when the guys were doing the rally, particularly the Friday, I think Donegal is always very familiar to everybody up there. And, I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering rightly, so I was actually in the US doing a rally with Seamus when that was on, and we were, of course, keen to look at the times and see what was going on. And then I knew the second stage time that the guys had, it was really a puncher. Like it went in very well there, and it was quite fast. Unfortunately, they had a problem on stage 3 and came back right and came back to complete the rally as Rally 2. And when you restart on a rally, some of the wind is definitely taken out of your sails. At that point, you're going for a finish, and you're definitely going to get all your miles. Not the competitive element hasn't disappeared, but it's definitely stifled. But it would have been nice to see them come back and try and put in another result on Irish soil and show just how strong they were, and as I say, represent for the American Championship and what the level that the championship is at, and how they can take their speed and their experience and bring it somewhere else and acquit themselves very well, as to my mind they did.
For sure. And like, I suppose, we've held just long enough now, we can start to wrap things up now. I suppose, like, what will be your standout memories of, in a few sentences, your standout memories of Ken Block, the rally driver, and Ken Block, the man?
Sorry, Kevin, the question was for me, is that correct?
Yeah, I will start off with you there,
Okay.
Alex. Yep.
Yeah, well, let me say a comment first about Ken, the human being, the man, and one thing that, look, we were at this celebration on Wednesday, and you think you know someone well, and then you hear all those people telling stories about Ken and saying their personal experience, and then you realize you only knew 50% of them. So it was great to understand Ken more, and it's sad that happened after he passed away. But Ken was a very private individual. Yes, we spent hundreds of thousands of hours in the car over many years. So one thing that I like to say about Ken is that, and that was sometimes not very clear, but one of his biggest passion was to find the right people out in this world and sort of like discreetly take them under his wing and make somebody out of them. Could have been a videographer, could have been a marketing media person, could have been a team manager, could have been a technician, could have been a co-driver, but there was something that we just now realize is something that he loved to do. And he was really good at that, because there has been some people that have built careers, that have built businesses from just his association with him. And those businesses has gone on and have had employees, that it was such a snowball effect, such a chain reaction, that in the back of his mind, that we now realize he knew exactly about this whole process, but some of us sort of like missed it, identifying what he was doing with that. And as far as a rally driver, that's a tough one, guys, because I've been contemplating, for example, what my future in the sport will be, and I can't find an answer at this point. If you ask me today, I will stop, but at the same time, there is a couple of things that are on the table. I think, what would Ken want me to do? Would he want me to carry on and enjoy life in this beautiful sport, because that's what he was all about. So I'll maybe sit down by myself in a couple of months' time and collect my thoughts and decide what to do. But going back to your original questions, it was something special. It was something special in that car, the absolute trust with each other. He trusted me with his life, and I did with the other way around, and it's something that it'll be hard to replicate, but even to tell the tale, to tell the story, because it was something really special. Two good mates, doing what they loved, and we've been privileged thanks to his hard work of the progressions we've had over the last several years of going from him smaller privateer to signing contracts with big manufacturers that allowed us to compete at the world scene. So like I said a few minutes ago, it's been an absolute privilege, and it's something that I will stay forever in my heart, and I've just been grateful, just absolutely grateful. I wish I had a few minutes to tell him that, because I told him on some occasions. So over the years, one time was in Finland, like over 10 years ago, and one time more recently. I said I just wanted, just like in strange moments, just before the start of the stage, waiting to put our helmets on and a few Ks away from the start of the stage, I said, I just want to say something to you, man. I just want to say that I am grateful for everything you've done for me and for our team and for everybody that has been associated. I just wanted to say it now. I don't know why I needed to say at that moment, but it was something important for me to say to him.
Neil, do you want to take that? What's your memories of Ken the driver and Ken the man?
Yeah, I'm going to say Ken the driver, and it'll go on for a while. I don't think that, and I'm going to kind of just focus it towards the US. I don't think that Ken the driver, as a rally driver, got the credit he deserved in the US. We'll always remember wreck, and we could remember many wrecks that Colin McRae had as well. But Ken the rally driver in the United States, I seen Ken step up his game many, many times. I seen him step up his game against Niall McShay when he came here. He never let me forget it. He asked me, about a stage we're going to be on the South Arm stage, and this is you're going to have trouble there. He matched the times with him on the stage. This is a guy that Marshall Clarkson on with him. These guys did big stuff. But Ken the driver, I can tell you that I've been places where I cringe, not because I think he's going to wreck it. It's just, and I'll put it down to one place, and it was recently, and Chris was standing beside me. I talked to Ken before the start of 100 Acre Woods last year, and I said to him, "You're going to ease into this?" I always say that to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, check it out." So the first time he came down the stage was reasonably. We were in a different perspective. We were down with the corner. It was reasonably, tame. The second pass he came down, I've never seen anything like it in my life before. I never, I've been to a couple of WRC events, and maybe I was standing in the wrong spot, but I'm from Letterkenny. I've seen stuff in Donegal. This was just something else for the speed of this car. I've seen the speed different places before, and 100 Acre Woods is Ken's rally. But I'll kind of, I'll go back to what I said earlier is, and I'll treasure this. Last year at Olympus Rally, I was sitting to get into the hotel, after looking around and doing whatever, and I asked somebody where get something to eat around here, and they said, "Oh, the hotel's actually all right." So I sit down in the lobby in the middle of over in the corner, kind of tucked in the corner, and I had a bit of dinner going, whatever it was, and next thing Ken comes slinking through and he's kind of all twisted out of shape, and he's like, "Oh, Ken!" It's always the same introduction when he sees you, and he comes over and he sits down and he starts eating my dinner, but he sit there for, I don't know, it was like 45 minutes or whatever. It was one of the best conversations because we just talked about everything, and I'll always remember it because it was, this is, as I said earlier, there's a Ken that we see and we're going to see forever. We're going to see that it's there. It's in the archives, and it's great to have it. But to know Ken the person, and just to have the privilege, as Alex said, and the honor to be even part of the team, but the privilege to know him, and I'll be a bit sad about it and say that I did get to know Lucy and not as well as Alex, obviously, but and the kids throughout the years, and I can't even explain my heart feels for that, but I will always remember Ken the person as just this genuine, down to earth person who loved rally as much as we did. In every form and fashion of it, he loved it. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Martin, same question to yourself.
The first thing I would say is that, he's a great loss, personally and sportingly. and we have to remember him fondly and remember reverence for all he has done for the sport. And I think that we will. The other point to that is, I think a lot of it probably, I'm circling around essentially what Neil was saying as well, that he didn't get the respect as a driver that I know he deserved. But that's just to people behind the keyboard. Those of us who did it and were on the same timesheets knew and have respect for him, and his peers don't need any convincing in that respect. So that's a good thing. We know. And just I never my thought, my abiding thought of Ken when knew he was here no longer was that I've never been in a conversation with him or walked away from a conversation or observed a conversation that he was having with anyone and walked away thinking anything other than he was a nice man, a good man, and a gentleman. He, I never could never say a bad word in that respect. He treated everyone with respect and had good conversations with them, whether it was, a small private conversation about things like, dogs and kids going to school and so on, or a sporting conversation. So, and I don't think you can say that about everybody that you meet in the sport. And I say that I say that very genuinely. And another nice memory I have of him that I didn't touch on earlier on, I'd said that, my first introduction to DC shoes, and I knew roughly what DC shoes were as a brand. And, as a younger guy, I remember seeing them, being more drawn to them because all of a sudden there was this rally connection, and thinking just how cool the New Zealand Snow Lab video was. And, little did we know, it just went on and on from there. That was just before, I believe, the Gymkhana days, the first Gymkhana. That would have been the N12 shaped Subaru, and then Gymkhana would have started with the N14 shaped Subaru. So thinking how cool that was. And I'd started competing in the US, 05, 06, then 07, it became more regular for me. And then in 07, I knew that there was these DC Prospect boots, and I really, really wanted a pair. And I mentioned it to somebody, in the team, where could I get a pair? What could I do? And they said, leave it with me. I'll mention it to Ken. And when I came to the next rally, somebody knocked on the door of my hotel room from the team and said, here, I heard you were looking for these. Here's a set of these. And apart from them being comfortable and brilliant and functional and the best rally boot you could ask for, it was just a special thing for me to get them. And I wore them till I wore them out. I still have them. They'll be a pride of place. And then after that, again, just to have them, it was after the conversation that I come back to for a third time, where James pointed out to the ARA guys, do you realize just how big a draw these guys are? And I thought I had two pairs of DCs at home, a Travis pair and a Ken pair, a 43 pair. And I thought, something, I think maybe I'll get the boys to autograph them, because it'd be nice to have them. I know I have them and they're nice. And I took them, it was Ohio, the first rally we came back after COVID, took them and dropped them into Ken. And I have them signed there now. He signed them for me properly. Even again, the professionalism of him, they were signed with a paint pen, so it's entirely permanent. And they're there now, and it's nice to have in the collection. But he was just a kind, decent man, and we need to remember him fondly and with the respect that he deserved.
Sure. And Chris, finally yourself?
Well, I guess since I am the younger one here, sorry, but I didn't grow up with the likes of Colin McRae. I knew of Colin, obviously, being around the scene and stuff like that. But Ken, just a quick sentence about that, Ken would have been my generation's Colin, in a sense, because he was, he was extravagant with everything he did. He was never going at 90%. And I'm sure Alex knows that himself, between the crashes or the wins, he was trying to give it his all on every stage. And, as this is for the rally driver side of things, but watching him the last couple of years and switching between the Subaru, the Skoda, the Hyundai now recent, the pace that he made everyone go at, and everyone's levels have stepped up here in the American scene. Whether it's Travis, Ken, or Barry bringing the WRC car here or whatnot, it's just, everyone's game has stepped up. And seeing Ken, as Neil pointed out, at 100 Acre there, coming around. I think Neil was referencing stage 5, the second running. It was pouring rain at that point, and Ken comes sliding around this corner. I don't know if I've ever seen someone take a 90 as quick as he just came around, sliding around, covering everyone in spray and gravel, at that point. And never mind the other memory this year would have been the how small it was, but the jump at the high school in Ohio was just, it was unreal to capture and see in person, and the roars of the crowd afterwards. He brought the crowd with him to events, and you can tell the difference from an event where Ken or Travis weren't at, and when they were there, it brought in the crowds recently here in the American scene, and it was great to be around for that whole evolution of that period. But on a human level for Ken, him and my dad would always joke around at rallies and stuff like that. My father would be one to talk to a wall, not that I'm that far, away from him in that sense, but he definitely got a good chuckle out of Ken when a bunch of the Irish boys were doing the New York rally in 08 there, and they were getting Ken's signature on the top of Charlie Donnelly's hood at the time. And then I just remember my father wanted to take a photo with Ken because my father had a Mitsubishi, those big red Mitsubishi jackets from years ago there, and he wanted to just push Ken's buttons about having the Subaru, that battle and stuff like that. So but he would always stop anytime I would see him. He'd stop to talk and have a conversation. I wouldn't have known him as well as Neil would have, and obviously as well as Alex would have on the human level, because I was a bit trying to get to events when you're in college and stuff like that. It's a little bit different, but no, anytime I saw Ken and had a conversation with Ken, it was always genuine. And as the guy said, it's not like a character or anything like that. It's just the video camera's on. You have to present yourself a little bit of a different way, but on the personal side of things, when the camera's off, he was not a different person, but just a very genuine person. And that's what I'll take away from everything, over the years, and appreciate everything he did for everything out here, the rally scene out here.
And just before we wrap up, Kevin and myself spoke with Colin McMaster, and Alex, he had a story for us about the Safari Rally where he provided pace notes for a particular stretch of the road. Just wondering what your version of that is, Alex.
Well, look, let me just say that here I am. Sorry. Let me just say that Ken and Colin McMaster had this, direct, communication. Derek Donsey and myself weren't aware of it at first, and then he became known to, provide me with the spots that needed to be on the pace notes, or in the case of the Safari on the route book, where Colin thought that it was safe, it was safe to go 100% right there. And in the particular case of the Safari, it was a big moment because it was a jump, and Colin said to me, and I don't know if I can't remember if it was prior or after. He said to me that the school bus went by and the jump is flat. He took it flat and the jump is flat. And I said, okay, I trust Colin. I trusted 100%, and I still do. But then I said to Ken, we are approaching. I don't tell him before the start of the stage. I have it on the route book. We're approaching the jump, and I'm telling him, jump coming in 300, 400, 300, 200. Ken, the jump is flat. And typical Ken's fashion, he's gonna trust what I said. So he takes the jump flat, and the landing is like 1 or 2 kph faster. It would have been an end over end. But anyway, the picture is fantastic. But at the end of the stage, it tells me, Alex, why did you say that without? It's a blind event. And he said, well, the information came from Colin, So I put the story on Colin, and he said to me, okay, well, that's all I needed to know. And then I messaged Colin. I said, Colin, the jump wasn't flat. We took a big chance. But then the following, that evening we went back to the hotel, so the pictures. It was totally worth it. It was one of those occasions. So many times we got away with stuff. We had many crashes, many wins, but so many other times we got away with so many things. And my wife jokes with me and says, "I mean, you've gone gray really quick in the last 10 years." I know, like, yeah, blame it on Ken and events like the one that we just told. Yeah.
It was great that we could get Alex's side of the safari story after Colin told us his version of it earlier in the podcast. Genuinely, on behalf of Kevin and myself, I want to thank everybody that took part in this podcast. They gave up a lot of time, and we had, obviously time differences as well between Ireland and the US. So we really appreciate everybody's input. And to be honest, it's made me all the more fonder of Ken for having heard those stories.
That is for sure, for sure. We've heard some great stories. We spoke to some fantastic people, and I just hope that, in some small way, it, helps people just remember the good man that Ken was. So that was Crunching Gears, the Rally podcast. And until the next time, take care, speak soon, and bye. And here is some video and some stills provided by Chris Meegam and Martin Brady. Just remembering the great guy that Ken was.
Bye.